Good morning, everybody. It is the 19th of December. This is AI with Kyle. I'm going to be running through the latest updates from the world of artificial intelligence, as well as taking live audience questions. We have one big piece of news that has just come out, and I wanted to dive into it in quite a bit of depth because there's a few technical layers here that are not immediately obvious. So I wanted to kind of help explain why this is important and why we need to pay attention. So Reuters put out an article yesterday saying exclusive, how China built its Manhattan project to rival the West in AI chips. If this is true, if this journalism is correct and the sources can be trusted, this is a big deal, an extremely big deal for China and America and the future of artificial intelligence. And it comes down to these little guys. I'm going to talk about the tech a little bit just to kind of give a highlight of what's going on. If you do want to dive into this a bit more deeply, though, there's a book called Chip Wars by Chris Miller, I think his name is, which goes into a lot of details here. The book's actually been proven wrong by what we've just found out with the journalism. However, it still has a lot of very useful background information, so it's well worth diving into. If you need a Christmas suggestion and you want to dive into chip manufacturing and global politics. So there is a technology called EUV, extreme ultraviolet lithography. There is one company on Earth, one company who can do this, a Dutch company called ASML. And basically, extreme UV lithography is a way of putting circuit patterns onto I'll show you what it looks like, onto a chip space like this, where you can therefore have circuitry and you can therefore implant transistors and have very, 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 very fine levels of resolution on your chip. This is an example of a very crude chip. This is a PCB. I don't even know if that's going to be in focus. Probably not. A PCB. So you can see on the back of this are lines. Basically, these are the wires between the different elements on the chip. This is very crude. You can physically see them. You can physically solder it yourself. I did not solder this. This is a terrible job. What EUV allows us to do, or allows this one company to do, this one Dutch company, is to produce extremely high resolution chips, extremely high. This technology has been in the hands of one company and only one company, and the way that it's processed up to companies like Nvidia is ASML are the company who produce the EUV machines. They provide them to companies like TSMC, who are the Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturing company, I think, very descriptive name, who then sell to companies like Nvidia. So there's been this very tight chain. Nvidia don't actually don't print the chipsets themselves, and only one company has the technology to allow you to do this. The machines are absolutely enormous. They're hundreds of tons. Let's see if there's a picture of one. Hundreds of tons. They are very specific, and ASML actually worked with Zeiss and specific companies in Europe to get it done. This is what a rendering of what one looks like. So a rendering of ASML's EUV machines. You've got robotic arms, you've got extremely complicated machinery, and I think they cost about, I want to say about 200 million for one machine. It looks like China has reverse engineered the machine. This is what the Reuters article is about, so I'm going to dive into this. If this is the case, then the bottleneck on Chinese chip manufacturing technology has just been broken. Up until now, they have still been, to a certain extent, reliant on American chips and Taiwanese chips because of access to the ASML technology, the EUV machines. That may not be the case anymore. So previously, America has put pressure on the Dutch company ASML saying you may not sell these machines to China. It might not matter anymore. So if this is true, and again, this is speculative, but there is reporting, there are sources, but if this is true, this is absolutely gigantic. This is going to break the bottleneck. This is going to mean that Nvidia are not the only game in town via TSMC, via ASML, via these extreme ultraviolet machines, and instead China can build and manufacture their own chips natively in China. So in a high security Shenzhen laboratory, Chinese scientists have built what Washington has spent years trying to prevent: a prototype of a machine capable of producing the cutting-edge semiconductor chips that power artificial intelligence, smartphones, and weapons central to Western military dominance. Completed in early 2025 and now undergoing testing, the prototype fills nearly the entire factory floor. It was built by a team of former engineers from Dutch semiconductor giant ASML, who reverse engineered the company's extreme ultraviolet lithography machines, EUVs, according to two people with knowledge of the project. EUV machines sit at the heart of the technological Cold War, and this is what the book Chip Wars is about. They use beams of extreme ultraviolet light to etch circuits thousands of times thinner than a human hair onto silicon wafers, currently a capability monopolized by the West, by one company, ASML. The smaller the circuits, the more powerful the chips, because you can pack more transistors, you can pack more technology into a much smaller space. China's machine is operational and successfully generating extreme ultraviolet light, but has not yet produced working chips, the people said. In April, ASML CEO Christopher Fouquet said that China would need many, many years to develop such a technology, but the existence of this prototype, reported by Reuters for the first time, suggests China may be years closer to achieving semiconductor independence. Do not underestimate China. Very silly, extremely arrogant. And this is what happens. Nevertheless, China still faces major technical challenges, of course, particularly in replicating the precision optical systems that Western suppliers produce. So this is what Zeiss create, Z-E-I-S-S. They create these extremely precise optical systems. They worked directly with ASML. ASML brought them in on the project. That is something that China apparently does not have yet. The availability of parts from older ASML machines on secondary markets has allowed China to build a domestic prototype, with the government setting a goal of producing working chips on the prototype by 2028. So that is now 2 years away. So pretty much 2026, according to these two people. But those close to the project say a more realistic target is 2030, which is still years earlier than the decade that analysts believe it would take China to match the West on chips. So it looks like the race is about to hot up, and it's going to be very close in a couple of years rather than 10 years down the line. Because the Chinese domestic companies like Huawei have been trying to build chipsets like Nvidia, and so far have not managed. And that's why, supposedly, we've seen the delay on the new DeepSeek model. They just cannot, on their domestic chips, get to the level required to make it as a worthwhile release. This is also why we've had Trump, and prior to Trump, massive tariffs and bans on selling chips directly to mainland China. So the H200s in particular, the Nvidia kind of workhorse chip that is used to train artificial intelligence models, has been banned from being sold to China until last week, when it has been allowed by Donald Trump, as long as Nvidia pay 25% directly of the revenue straight to the US government. However, it seems that the Chinese have not been particularly receptive to that. They have not said, oh, thank God, please sell us your chips. That just hasn't happened. And this might be the reason, because they know that their domestic production in a couple of years' time is going to be there. So they are becoming independent. They're splitting away. They're not requiring the import of these chips because potentially they have the EUV technology up their sleeve. The breakthrough marks a culmination of a 6 years government initiative to achieve semiconductor self-sufficiency, one of President Xi Jinping's highest priorities. While China's semiconductor goals have been public, the Shenzhen EUV project has been conducted in secret. And there's some stuff here where the people were brought in and they were not told what they're going to be working on. They were working under fake names because they had to kind of stop leaks and stop stuff from getting out. So it's been an extremely high security project. And they hired a lot of people from ASML. So Chinese nationals who had gone and worked at the Dutch company ASML, who had insider knowledge, but after they stopped working for ASML, after a certain number of years, can be legally hired. So they've been sneaky, but this is a level of strategic national security, as you can understand why. Here we go. So one veteran Chinese engineer from ASML recruited to the project was surprised to find that his generous signing bonus came with an identification card issued under a false name. Once inside, he recognized other former ASML colleagues who were also working under aliases and was instructed to use their fake names to maintain secrecy, the person said. So they knew each other in Holland or wherever they were based before, and then suddenly they were back in Shenzhen, having to call each other fake names. Another person independently confirmed that recruits were given fake IDs to conceal their identities. The guidance was clear. Classified under national security, no one outside the compound could know what they were building or that they were there at all. The team includes recently retired Chinese-born former ASML engineers and scientists, prime recruitment targets because they possess sensitive technical knowledge but face fewer professional constraints after leaving the company. So there will be NDAs, and there'll be various restrictions on what they can say about their prior employee, but once they've retired and after a certain number of years, that becomes moot, basically. So if this is true, and this reporting seems fairly in-depth, and it is Reuters, so it's a press agency, they don't just publish any nonsense. If this is the case, then China is about to become a lot more competitive in artificial intelligence. Up until now, they have been scraping together models using what Nvidia chips they have, using some Huawei chips, importing and repurposing like black market chips, and they've still managed to put out extremely good models, especially in the open source market. If they get to the point where they can apply all of that expertise, all of that knowledge, all of those very efficient algorithms to creating models with a lower power, with a lower training capacity, if they can apply all of that learning over these few years of kind of restrictions, and then apply the power of their own chips, these EUV produced chips, then they will rocket ahead. Absolutely rocket ahead. So right now they're basically being trained as a market to be incredibly efficient in a way that the Western market is not. The Western market is about buy more chips, spend more money, use more electricity, build bigger data centers, and then just blast our way through the scaling laws. Whereas the Chinese engineers and the Chinese labs are having to work out how to do it in a smart, more efficient way. So when they have access to this huge capacity, which is a couple of years down the line by the looks of it, they will be able to absolutely overtake. So this is absolutely gigantic news, probably one of the biggest pieces of news of the year, but it's relatively complex and it's relatively long term. This is going to take a couple of years before it actually has any impact, but this could sway the entire course of where artificial intelligence goes. So I wanted to cover in some depth. I'm going to hop over to some questions. Obviously, we're going to see how this develops over time, but if this is true, it might be the ball game. I'm not seeing any questions. That's okay. I'm going to do a relatively short one today, because I still have a cold, as you can probably hear, and I have a call in about half an hour, so I'll hop off then. Actually, talking about putting together a conference, an AI conference. So I'm talking to I'm sure it's fine talking about this, talking to a conference organizer who puts together summits, and we're going to pull together a bunch of really interesting people to talk about different ways to use artificial intelligence, specifically to start businesses, to create side hustles, to generate an income from artificial intelligence. So I'm talking to a conference organizer. We're going to start putting some together for early in the new year, which should be cool. I'm excited about that, especially because we're going to bring in a lot of different speakers talking about different areas. So I'm hoping to learn a lot as well. But more details on that probably in the new year. Oh, if you are interested in the semiconductors race, have a look at Chip Wars. So it came out, I want to say, a couple of years ago, 2022. And it talks about how basically control of semiconductor technology it's like the new oil. It's the new resource that nations, primarily America and China, need to fight over. And EUV, extreme ultraviolet lithography, is one of the main technologies that bottlenecks it and puts the race in America's favor. With it expected not to be developed by China for decades, no longer the case. So Chip Wars is very much predicated on the fact that, China won't get this technology, so America's going to be safe. That's no longer true, but this book is still very, very relevant. It just underestimated China, unfortunately. I'm going to talk about Yeah, let me hop over to this. So there's a piece of research that was published a couple of days ago. As always, I'll put this in the newsletter because it's always going to be better for you to go through it yourself and find what's interesting for you. But it's about what Americans think about artificial intelligence. So it came out a couple of days ago. It's a survey. There's a full survey, but this is just the overview. And it's about what they're using it for, what they think about artificial intelligence, etc. So a couple of kind of very obvious things, like younger generations using it a bit more than older generations. That's not too exciting. I think what I found fascinating was this chart here, which is asking what people think, and if they have a favorable and unfavorable point of view on the various different companies out there. So we've got Amazon, who do make AI, but they're not really known as an AI company. Google, Facebook, Twitter, OpenAI, XAI, and Anthropic. What I found hilarious here was how many people just don't know who Anthropic are. So Anthropic create Claude, which is my personal favorite AI model, and it's an extremely good model. 81% of the American public basically said, I've never heard of it, or I'm not sure. So I have no opinion about Anthropic whatsoever. And 9% of people were favorable and 10% were unfavorable, which I find very strange. I would have thought if you know who Anthropic are, you'd probably be favorable, because they tend to be very, well, they focus on ethics, they focus on guardrails, etc. But a lot of people have said, I have no idea who Anthropic are. And this is a really good reminder of, if you do know who Anthropic are, if you do know what Claude is, you are ahead of 80% of the US public. And I think that's a really good reminder that if you're watching me, some British nerd, on a Friday morning talking about this kind of stuff, you are well ahead of all of this stuff. You might not think so because you're watching this kind of content and you're watching people talk about this and you're thinking, oh, I need to know more. You have to compare yourself to this. The people, the 80% of America who have no idea who Anthropic are, no idea what Claude is. That's what you need to compare to, not the people that you're seeing, people like myself every single day. Also, XAI, 76% of people have no idea what that is. 42% don't know who OpenAI are, which is higher than I thought. Again, this is probably me assuming everybody knows what ChatGPT is and what OpenAI is, but no, that is not the case. 42% do not know. 33% are favorable and 25% are unfavorable for OpenAI, which, again, if you spend all your time online on Reddit and Twitter, is surprising, because there is so much hatred against OpenAI, with people like, oh, they changed the model and they ruined this and they're messing it up and OpenAI is dead and ChatGPT got worse, etc. All of that anger and fury, but that is not shown when you actually just ask the general public. And remember that ChatGPT has 900 million users. So the few angry people talking about how much they hate ChatGPT online and they ruined 4.0 and whatever, of a tiny, 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 tiny minority. So it's very important to remember that. The other thing that I thought was really fascinating, and again, I'll put this in the newsletter so you'll be able to go through it in your own time, is they put it right at the bottom here in the dustbin, which I think is unfair. A question that was interesting but didn't lead to large conclusion was asking what happens when you ask a tool like ChatGPT a question. 45% think it looks up an exact answer in a database, and 21% think it follows a script of pre-written responses. So I don't expect people to know the ins and outs of how large language models work. It's quite complex and it takes a few days of study to work it out and to kind of understand it intuitively. But half of people, 45%, believe that there's a big database that ChatGPT is talking to. There's not. There is not a big database. That's just incorrect. So I had somebody earlier on in the chat said, let's see if I can find it. They were asking, why does ChatGPT get things wrong? And this is part of the reason why. There isn't it's not like the internet where there is a big database of facts. It just doesn't exist inside a large language model. I can't find the answer to the question. But they're basically saying, why is ChatGPT stupid and why does it get things wrong? The reason is it's trained on the internet, it's trained on all the books, it's trained on anything that they can throw at this model. But that is all tokenized and then put into a vector database that shows the relationship between these different concepts within this massively high dimension vector database. There are no facts in there. There are no things that it can look up. All that exist are relationships between different concepts. That's it. And some of those relationships have a very strong connection. So Paris and France have a very strong connection between them, whereas Paris and Texas, which is a place, Paris, Texas is a place, will have a slightly weaker connection than Paris, France. And then Paris, Congo, like an unrelated country, will have a much weaker connection. So every single concept, every single token, I should say token because they're not all exact concepts, within this database have relationships with the others. And that creates this kind of web of meaning and how strongly connected these concepts are between each other. There is not a lookup table. There's not a giant database like Wikipedia or like Google where you can find concepts and find facts about them. So the fact that 45% of people think that AI or large language models work in this way suggests why they get angry when it gives incorrect answers, because they're expecting it to work like Google and just look things up. They're expecting it to work like Wikipedia and to have facts ready for them that they can trust. That's not the case. That is just not how they work, which is kind of a double-edged sword, because that's what leads to AIs being creative and being really useful from their emergent properties. But at the same time, we cannot always rely on their answers because of the way that inference happens, because of the way that responses occur. If this is news to you and you thought that it was a giant database, have a look at, just trying to think, probably 3 brown, yeah, we'll go for, have a look at 3 blue 1 brown, I got his name wrong, and have a look specifically, ignore all of this is very confusing looking, have a look specifically at, probably the explainer. Now I think, there we go, he's got there we go. This is half an hour's. No, that's going to be too complex. Let me see if he's got a really simple one. Because it is important to understand this stuff, and there are people who explain it really well. I'm just trying to find a simpler one. And I'm sure there we go. Large language models explained briefly is the name of this video. Again, I'll put this in the newsletter. So large language model explained, excuse me, briefly for the curious beginner. This is by a guy who talks about mathematics, but he goes through and helps you get an intuitive understanding of the mechanisms that are happening inside a large language model. You do not need to understand it all, but by going through this half-an-hour video, you will at least have some kind of foundation and intuition for what's happening and what importantly is not happening, which is looking it up inside of a database. So I'll add this into the newsletter so you'll have the direct link, because this is one of the best explainer videos. Take your time with it. Actually, sorry, it's not half an hour, it's only 8 minutes. So watch it multiple times because he's an extremely good explainer, but it is a complicated subject. So I'm sorry, that sounds patronizing. I had to watch this multiple times before I got it. And I highly recommend you just take the time to work through this and really get it. You can also take this over to NotebookLM, dump it in NotebookLM and have it put together summaries and have it test you on the particular. There we go. So I just paste it in there, and then NotebookLM would be able to help teach me and create material. I can discuss the video with NotebookLM and really make sure that I actually understand this concept. So highly recommend that. And again, I'll put that in the newsletter tomorrow. Is Gemini better than ChatGPT? They're still large language models, so they work in exactly the same way. They have different tricks in their training. They use different methods in pre-training and post-training, fine-tuning, but fundamentally they're both large language models, so they both use the same underlying architecture. So same with XAI, same with Claude. They all use this same architecture. Sample size and demographic. Yep, really good question, Jack. Sample size is relatively small. I think it was 3,000. 2,300, not many. I'll put the full survey in here. And this is the top line. So it's 2,300 Americans age 18 plus, weighted by gender, race, and education. 2024 vote for president, so their politics, and birth year. So they have weighted it, but it's a relatively small sample size. So I'd say it's more of a survey than a study. Oh, they do call it a survey, to be fair. What's the best way to learn about LLM and AI? It would be by checking out that video that I showed you. So three brown, one blue. God, I got it wrong again. 3 blue, 1 brown. He has a whole series on neural nets. So if you come into here in playlist, neural networks, this here will get you a long way, an extremely long way. He has specific videos that go into the mathematics, which you can skip if you are not interested. So I forget which one it is. But there's one way he's like, okay, here we go, backpropagation calculus. So you can learn about backpropagation intuitively in chapter 3. And then if you understand calculus, if you're okay with that kind of stuff, you can go into chapter 4. If not, just skip and go through to transformers. So he's very good at explaining mathematics without you necessarily having to have studied those mathematics. Obviously it helps, but it is not fully required. And the other one would be Andrei Karpathy, who I'm sure a lot of you know already. So Karpathy, he has a series. These 3 up here for the general audience are fantastic. So deep dive into LLMs like ChatGPT. I think it's about 3 hours. Yeah, 3.5 hours. So it's pretty heavy, but if you break that up and you watch that over multiple sessions, again, that's going to give you an intuitive understanding of what these things are. So I'd highly recommend them as starting points. Claude's map, just scrolling back. Where is Microsoft? Poor Microsoft. They are not in the race at the moment. What they're doing is focusing on enterprise AI through Copilot and Copilot 365. The problem is their base product, Copilot, is not very good. There's no real two ways about that. In fact, they've even admitted that, and they cut their sales targets by 50% about a week ago. So they acknowledge that it's not working. And the reason that was given was there's very little demand. So Copilot's actually built on ChatGPT because Microsoft own 27% of OpenAI, and they use the model inside of Copilot, but they've neutered it, they've guardrailed it, they've made it less useful in some ways so that people don't actually want to use it. So whenever I work with Microsoft organizations, a lot of the time they don't understand the hype about AI, they don't understand why they should be using it, and that's because they're using Copilot, which is genuinely not very good. That said, Microsoft are putting AI into all of their different pieces of software, which is a really cool idea. So it's going to be in PowerPoint, it's going to be in Power BI, it's going to be, in their Azure, it's going to be in everything. But each of their individual implementations so far isn't very good. So it just leaves a sour taste in the mouth of many people who use it, because none of the actual implementations are good. The promise of an AI or an organization that has a centralized AI and all of the components have the same AI is really exciting. The reality of it is not there yet. So I do feel for anyone who has to use Copilot, because it is rubbish. Speaking of an alternative, so NotebookLM, which I just showed you because I threw a video into it, but NotebookLM is fantastic. It's from Google, and we just got some news from, it kind of worked. I'm going to check it out. So Manus, and let me step back a bit. So NotebookLM can generate slide decks for you, really good slide decks. So I did one the other day, when I think it was on Monday, when we had no news, basically no AI news, and I was like, what am I going to talk about? And I don't like to just talk about random fluff for the sake of it. So what I did was I took a guide that I'd written, I don't know, about 10,000 words, chucked it into NotebookLM, and it produced this slide deck that you see on the screen in about 5 minutes for me. And then I delivered this slide deck. So really good looking. And this is from Nano Banana Pro. There is no, there are no problems with the text. There's no garbled text, there's no misspellings, anything like that. And it basically created this whole slide deck for me. Really cool. So this is NotebookLM. One problem with this is I can't edit it. So let's say I don't like this this title up here. There's nothing I can do about that. That is not editable. So what Manus have actually done, they have said, hey, by the way, you can now edit slides created with Nano Banana Pro on Manus. Really cool. Really, really cool. Not regenerate, edit. Click on the text and change it. Point to a visual and adjust it. Select multiple areas and update them all at once. It's what AI presentations should have been from the start. I think that's a bit unfair. NotebookLM just came out with their presentations about 2 weeks ago. But Manus, which is not Google, have updated it. They've said, oh, actually, we're going to allow you to make adjustments directly. So this is really cool. And if I'm a company like Gamma, or if I'm Microsoft and I have PowerPoint, I would be a little bit worried about this. So let's see. I just did this with Manus. I said, go ahead and make me a go to my website and grab information about me and make me a basic presentation. And it's done it. It's fine. I mean, considering I gave it no instructions. It's made up of random dude here. Okay, it's perfectly fine. I don't know what all these random images are, but that's fine because I like that. Because I've done it in Manus, and because Manus has generated this using Nano Banana Pro, we can now actually edit things. So I can now move this around. I can replace this image of this random dude it's created for me. I think I can even talk to it and say, hey, can you change things for me? So this makes the Nano Banana Pro generated presentations even more useful, because now we can actually change things on the screen, which is super, super cool. So I just wanted to talk about that. So you take any information. So let's say that video that I just covered about how LLMs work. You can take that over to NotebookLM from Google. I can then click slide deck, and that's going to generate a slide deck for me. I can then take that slide deck over into Manus and edit it and change it around. So I have a new workflow that's been unlocked for me, a really, really cool workflow, allowing me to make slides, allowing me to edit those slides and generate presentations in, minutes, absolute minutes. So again, this presentation that Nano Banana Pro created for me took 5 minutes to make. This would have taken me all day. Look how detailed this is. But now with Manus, I can also edit it. So I wanted to shout out both Manus and NotebookLM. I think Google needs to buy Manus or steal that technology, because that is so, so, so cool. Yeah, so if you make presentations, it's just got a lot easier, Simon says, love Manus. Yeah, Manus is really cool. And they keep adding stuff. And I'm quite lucky. I don't actually pay for Manus, but I've talked about it so much that and used the referral link that apparently I have 17,000 free credits. That's cool. Which I did not realize. I haven't logged onto it for, I don't know, a month or so, and there's thousands of free credits. So I'm going to abuse those. There are so many organizations that talk about Copilot. How safe is the data? So that's one of the good reasons for using Copilot, is that it's Microsoft and people trust Microsoft. If they're already using Microsoft for their ecosystem, it's probably going to be fine. And it also comes with enterprise level security. So you can have a lot more control over your data than you would if you are using, or if your staff are just using a random ChatGPT account. Because that is the problem, is that if you don't provide your staff with good AI, and staff members are using artificial intelligence outside of work and they know how useful it is, they're just going to start using AI at work. And we have something called shadow IT, which is when people bring their own BYO AI to work and just use their free versions of ChatGPT, their free versions of Claude, whatever it is. All of that information is going straight up to the ChatGPT servers because they're using the free version. They're probably not turning on the data controls, etc. So with Microsoft, and when you're running it in an enterprise, the IT department have a lot more control over that kind of stuff, which is for the best if you are in a business. Right, just running back through some of the questions, but I do need to hop off because I do have a meeting in a minute. So next week I will not be doing the live show because it is Christmas. It is a holiday. We're giving the editor a week off as well, I think. So I won't be around. I'm hoping there won't be much news anyway because everyone's kind of on a holiday, but I'll be back shortly afterwards. I will have news about this new conference. I'm about to have a meeting about, so putting on a conference with a number of other people in the AI space talking about how to make money from artificial intelligence. We're going to have many speakers talk about all the different ways and giving you all of the options and helping you kind of work your way through what's going to be the best for you. I'm also launching the AI workshop kit again in January. So I haven't run a cohort for a couple of months now. So we're going to be doing a new one in 2026, 1st of 2026. There will be information about that in the newsletter shortly. But basically, the AI workshop kit is me giving you all of my materials that I use to teach companies about artificial intelligence, that I use to train companies. And you can go and do that training yourself. And it comes with certification from me, a cohort over 4 weeks where we get you ready, we help you find your first clients, and also training on how to deliver the material. So we're going to be launching that, I think on the 6th of January. I might be wrong about that, but if you are in the newsletter, you'll be the first to get the news. And I'll show you how I go and charge $2,000 an hour to go and teach workshops to businesses. So hopefully that is something that's going to be of interest to you. So if you are not in the newsletter, come to aiwithkyle.com and head to either join community. Join community is going to be the best way. Oh, there we go. And then enter your email here. That will put you in the newsletter where there'll be information about the AI workshop kit, and it will put you into the community where you can talk about what we've been discussing in the live and generally just what AI means for you and what you plan to do with AI. And I'm in there as well, helping everyone out and guiding the discussions as well. So fantastic. Thank you, everybody. I will not be here next week, as I said. So have a wonderful holiday. And I'm sure we'll be back in the new year with some very exciting new AI launches, plus the AI workshop kit. So I'm very much looking forward to working with you, some of you directly on that as well. Fantastic. Thank you, guys.